your smile, like the sunshine brings the light. Fill me out with a flame. I will let you in this game. Take me out where I'm down. 'Cause with you I'm safe and sound. 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 I'm safe and
TikTok made me do it. If you use TikTok, you might have seen videos like these recently claiming that the combination of L-tyrosine and B vitamins is like a natural Adderall. If you thought about purchasing these two supplements to try out these effects, then you're probably looking for a group of natural supplements that can give you a rush of sustained energy and focus without having to worry about the side effects of synthetic drugs. There's a lot to unpack here, but in the next 60 seconds, I'm going to explain exactly why all this recent hype is surrounding tyrosine and show you some of the other natural ingredients that you might want to try out instead. Now, L-tyrosine is a non-essential amino acid that plays a lot of different roles in the human body, from producing enzymes to hormones to helping your nerves communicate through neurotransmitters. The role tyrosine plays that is causing its virality on TikTok is as a precursor to dopamine, the pleasure neurotransmitter, and adrenaline, the stress hormone that can give you a rush of energy. We have nothing against L-tyrosine. In fact, at UMZU, we actually use L-tyrosine in a supplement for improving thyroid health. If you're looking for a rush of energy and focus, there are two other natural ingredients that we'd recommend for better results. The first is teocrine. Now, teocrine is a naturally occurring compound that's really popular with athletes. Its chemical structure is very similar to caffeine. It's been shown in clinical trials to stimulate the central nervous system, boost energy levels, and improve mental clarity and increase focus. In addition, while you can build up a tolerance to caffeine, the body cannot build up a tolerance to teocrine. And what's really interesting is that teocrine has been shown to enhance the energetic effects of caffeine by up to 3 times when taken together. So if you really want to get the rush of energy that you're after, pairing caffeine with teocrine is going to get you amazing results. The next thing you want to do is extend the effects of that energy all day long. For this, we recommend L-theanine. L-theanine smooths out the rush of energy from caffeine and extends the release over a longer period of time. So if you're looking for a rush of energy and focus from natural supplements, then pairing a small dose of caffeine with teocrine and L-theanine is going to produce even better results than the L-tyrosine. At UMZU, we specialize in formulating supplements that solve real problems. Other supplement companies typically force you to buy all these individual ingredients separately, leaving the guesswork up to you on the effective dosage and the quality of these ingredients. Now, low energy and focus are real problems these days, with workload and stress levels at all-time highs. So we brought all of the natural ingredients that you need to feel a rush of energy and focus into one convenient supplement called Miracle Morning. Miracle Morning is going to give you organic caffeine, teocrine, L-theanine, B vitamins, and more in the clinically effective dosages of the highest possible quality, all in just one capsule.
Sorry, party's canceled. Waiting on the cable internet guy.
Tell him, Zach.
First, I had cable, but those cords weren't me. I needed to find new Wi-Fi.
And he cried.
Let him cry.
So he switched to T-Mobile. Home internet with 5G. It runs on their network. Just plug it in and you'll see.
What a feeling!
I have Wi-Fi now.
Can't stop streaming.
Have some wings to chow. I need home internet from T-Mobile to fulfill my life. My life. Yeah, what's up? We have T-Mobile now. Party's back on.
Do it again with your shirt off. You guys are fine.
Journey to the East in Final Fantasy XIV Stormblood, now included in the free trial. Embark upon a new adventure to realms near and far, and rekindle the fires of hope. Play now at ff14-freetrial.com.
All right. Not gonna do much today. It's Valentine's Day, so gonna hang out with the girlfriend for the rest of the day. But gonna just do a quick stream today. We're going to watch a sermon on today's Bible passage of the week. It is Psalm 23. So here we go. And then we'll play a game of Risk.
I think if you looked on paper, you would not put us through.
Today we take the privilege of looking at the tremendous psalm, perhaps the most beloved psalm of all 150 psalms, the beloved Psalm 23. I'm going to begin just by reading the psalm in its entirety because it's not very long. And it's beautiful just to read it and to receive it. Ready? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me besides the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Now, like many other psalms, this beloved psalm bears the simple title, A Psalm of David. That's all it says about it. And most people acknowledge while King David wrote it, it was a psalm of his maturity. In other words, we sense, we can't say for certain, of course, but we sense this is something of an older David giving this psalm, yet with a vivid remembrance of his youth as a shepherd. Because we remember that. David was a shepherd boy. And he wrote this remarkably eloquent and beautiful psalm speaking about the Lord being our shepherd. There's a old preacher named Henry Ward Beecher, and he's quoted in Charles Spurgeon's Treasury of David about what he had to say about this psalm. Henry Ward Beecher said this about Psalm 23. It has charmed more griefs to rest than all the philosophy of the world. It has remanded to their dungeon more felon thoughts, more black doubts, more thieving sorrows than there are sands on the seashore. It has comforted the noble host of the poor. It has sung courage to the army of the disappointed. It has poured balm and consolation into the heart of the sick, of captives in dungeons, of widows in their pinching griefs, of orphans in their loneliness. Dying soldiers have died easier as it was read to them. Ghastly hospitals have been illuminated. It has visited the prisoner and broken his chains, and like Peter's angel, led him forth in imagination and sung him back to his home again. It has made the dying Christian slave freer than his master and consoled those whom, dying, he left behind mourning. Not so much that he was gone, as because they were left behind and could not go to. I think that's a beautiful description of the power of this psalm. Let me add one more thing before we start taking apart verse by verse. It's from James Montgomery Boyce in his excellent commentary on Psalms. He says this about Psalm 23. Millions of people have memorized this psalm, even those who have learned few other scripture portions. Ministers have used it to comfort people who are going through severe personal trials, suffering illness, or dying. For some, the words of this psalm have been the last they have ever uttered in life. It's true, isn't it? What a powerful, beautiful psalm. We read it in its entirety, all 6 verses. It's only 6 verses long. Let's take it apart now, verse by verse. Verse 1. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. You see, David thought about God, the God of Israel, the Lord, Yahweh. That's the name of the covenant God of Israel. And he thought about his relationship with God. I'm sure David understood that God was a master and David was his slave. That God was a father and David was his son. That God was a king and David was his subject. Maybe even David had the thoughts that God was like a potter and David was like the clay. We could go on and on with these analogies, but in this particular psalm, David draws on his memory as a shepherd, and he says, the Lord is my shepherd. It's the analogy of a shepherd and his sheep. God was like a shepherd to David, and David was like a sheep to God. Now, in one sense, this is not unusual. There are other references to this analogy between a deity and his followers in the ancient Middle East. There's also the thought politically that there were times when a king referred himself to being a shepherd over his subjects in the ancient Middle East. But it's also a familiar idea throughout the Bible. Now, we find it perhaps most beautifully and poetically stated right here in Psalm 23, but this is something that covers throughout the Old Testament. This idea that the Lord is a shepherd to his people. The idea begins as early as the book of Genesis, where in Genesis chapter 49, verse 24, Moses called the Lord, and Moses is the author of Genesis, the Lord, the shepherd, the stone of Israel. In Psalm 28, verse 9, David invited the Lord to shepherd the people of Israel and to bear them up forever. In Psalm 80, verse 1, it also looks to the Lord as the shepherd of Israel who would lead Joseph like a flock. Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 11 speaks of the word of the wise, which are like well-driven nails given by one shepherd. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 11 tells us that the Lord will feed his flock like a shepherd. He will gather the lambs with his arms. Micah chapter 7, verse 14 invites the Lord to shepherd your people with your staff as in days of old. And Zechariah chapter 13, verse 7 speaks of the Messiah as the shepherd who will be struck and the sheep will be scattered. By the way, that passage is quoted in Matthew chapter 26 when Jesus was arrested. So throughout the Old Testament, we find this idea that the Lord is the shepherd of God's people, that Yahweh is the shepherd of Israel. And I think it's remarkable that the Lord would call himself a shepherd, our shepherd. You see, in the ancient world, a shepherd's work was considered low. If a family needed a shepherd, it was always the youngest son, the one who had the least esteem in the family, who got the unpleasant assignment. You remember in 1 Samuel when the sons of Jesse were invited to a feast by the prophet Samuel, because the prophet Samuel had been told by God that the next king of Israel, the king to anoint, the person to anoint as the next king of Israel, was among the sons of this man named Jesse who lived in Bethlehem. David didn't even attend the feast. Why? Because he was out tending the sheep. He was the youngest and most despised in his family. Yet, as James Montgomery Boyce says, the great God of the universe has stooped to take just such care of you and me. Now, as we said, David knew this metaphor in a unique and powerful way because he had been a shepherd himself. And so this is a remarkably wonderful metaphor. Derek Kidner, in his commentary on the Psalms, points out that you have the more distant king or deliverer used as a metaphor. Impersonal words like rock or shield. But shepherd, a shepherd lives with his flock and is everything to it. The shepherd is the guide to the flock, the physician to the flock, the protector of the flock, the feeder of the flock, everything. And that's what the Lord is to his people. Now, if you look at that first line in verse 1, it says, the Lord is my shepherd. You see, David knew that in a personal sense. He could say, my shepherd. It was not just that the Lord was a shepherd for others in a theoretical sense. No, he was a real personal shepherd for David himself. I like what Charles Spurgeon said about that point. He said this: the sweetest word of the whole is that monosyllable, my. He does not say the Lord is the shepherd of the world at large and leadeth forth the multitude as a flock, but he says, the Lord is my shepherd. And if he were a shepherd to no one else, he is a shepherd to me. He cares for me, watches over me, and preserves me. Now, of course, David doesn't mean that to the exclusion of other people, nor would we. But it's a wonderful thing to take it deep in your soul. He is my shepherd. And overwhelmingly, the idea behind God's role as shepherd is a loving care and concern. David found comfort. He found security in the thought that God cared for him like a shepherd cares for his sheep. And of course, we know David knew how a shepherd cares for his sheep. David lived it. He experienced it himself. He had the heart of a shepherd for his own flock. And now he takes such delight in the thought that God cares for him that way. Now, David also felt that he needed a shepherd. You see, the very heart of this psalm doesn't connect with someone who is self-sufficient. But those people who truly sense their need, those people who are the poor in spirit that Jesus described in the Sermon on the Mount, they find great comfort in the idea that God can be a shepherd to them in a personal sense. You see, Spurgeon said that before a man can truly say, "The Lord is my shepherd," he must first feel himself to be a sheep by nature. I mean, you can't know that God is your shepherd unless you know that you have the nature of a sheep. And sheep can sometimes be foolish. Sheep are always dependent. And sheep have somewhat of a warped will. That's what you got to see yourself as if you're going to say, "The Lord is my shepherd." Now, "The Lord is my shepherd," the next line of verse 1, "I shall not want." You see, David, for him, the fact of God's shepherd-like care was the end of any need that could not be satisfied. He said, "I shall not want." And I believe that statement, "I shall not want," it was both a declaration, but it was also a decision. What do I mean by that? Well, "I shall not want" means that all my needs are supplied by the Lord, my shepherd. He supplies everything. I shall not want. I'm okay. I'm good. I'm set. The Lord is my shepherd. But "I shall not want" is also sort of a declaration that says, I decide to not desire anything more than what the Lord my shepherd gives. Whatever he gives me, it's enough. And I decide that. Now, that's the first verse. Let's take a look at the second verse, how the shepherd sustains the sheep. He says this, "He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters." Now, what does the shepherd do? He makes me to lie down. The Lord, as a shepherd, knew how to make David rest when he needed it, just as a literal shepherd would care for his sheep. The implication is that the sheep doesn't always know what it needs, and it doesn't always know what's best for itself, and so it needs the help that the shepherd brings. Now, this is a beautiful, a lovely image. Can't you just picture it in your mind? Can't you just picture the beautiful, calm morning, and the morning sun is beginning to shine over the beautiful green pasture, and there's the shepherd in the field with the sheep, and there's the green pasture, and the sheep are lying down. There's the sheep. I don't know how many there are. There's 20, there's 30, there's 40 sheep, and they're all lying down there, and the shepherd is standing, taking this wonderful shepherdly care over them. Isn't that a beautiful picture? There's a little creek running by. Can't you see the creek? You can hear it. It's quiet. It's beautiful. He says he makes me to lie down in those green pastures. Now, it's the green pastures, because the shepherd also knew the good places to make his sheep rest. So he faithfully guided the sheep to green pastures. Now, there's a wonderful book on Psalm 23. I dug out my old copy of it. It's by a man named Philip Keller, and it's called A Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23. And in this classic work on the 23rd Psalm, Philip Keller writes that sheep do not lie down easily. I should just explain. Philip Keller was a shepherd. He was a professional shepherd, and he wrote a book, and the title of the book was A Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23. So in it, he explains that sheep do not lie down easily, and they will not lie down unless 4 conditions are met. What are the 4 conditions? Well, first of all, because sheep are timid, they will not lie down if they're afraid. Secondly, because they are social animals, they will not lie down if there is friction among the sheep. Number 3, if there are flies or parasites that are troubling them, they will not lie down. And number 4, finally, if sheep are anxious about food, if they are hungry, they will not lie down. So, as Philip Keller explained, rest comes when the shepherd has dealt with fear, friction, flies, and famine. And that's what the Lord does for us. He wants to deal with our fears and say, lie down in green pastures. He wants to deal with the friction that we have with other people and especially with other believers. And he says, let me bring peace to that situation. He wants to knock away and drive away the flies or the parasites that would trouble us. And finally, he wants to feed us. He doesn't want us to lie down hungry. He wants us to be full in our souls of what he alone can provide. So he makes me lie down in green pastures, and he leads me beside the still waters. The shepherd knows when the sheep needs green pastures, and he knows when the sheep needs the still waters. Again, these images are so rich with a sense of comfort, care, and rest. It's not the rushing rapids, it's the still waters. There's calm, there's peace, there's grace. There's all the food in the green pastures that the sheep could want. There's all the water in the still waters that the sheep could need.
I'm getting killed. That sucks. I got screwed that round.
Need to drink. And then he continues on how the Lord leads along the way. Verse 3. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Now it's interesting. The tender care of the shepherd described in the previous verse had the intended effect. But by caring for the sheep, but by making him lie down in green pastures, but by bringing him beside the still waters, the soul of the sheep was restored. The shepherd's work had its intended effect. David's soul was restored by the figurative green pastures and the figurative still waters that the shepherd brought him. Now there's something to think about here. That word restores, at least in the translation of the New King James Version, which I'm teaching from, it said there, he restores my soul. That may very well picture the rescue of a lost sheep. James Montgomery Boyce said, and Derek Kidner agrees, he says, in Hebrew, the words restores my soul can mean brings me to repentance or to conversion. So he restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness. You see, the shepherd is also a guide. Think about this. The sheep didn't need to know where the green pastures were, where the still waters were. Sheep didn't need to know. All the sheep needed to know is where the shepherd was, because the shepherd would guide the sheep to whatever he needed. When you need the green pastures, follow the shepherd. The shepherd will take you there. When you need the still waters, follow the shepherd. The shepherd will take you there. And he leads me in the paths of righteousness. You see, the leadership of the shepherd did not only comfort and restore the sheep, it also guided him into righteousness. God's guidance of David had a moral aspect. They were paths, but they were paths of righteousness. And he did it all, notice that last line of verse 3, for his name's sake. The shepherd guides the sheep with an overarching view to the credit and the glory of the shepherd's own name. Now, take a look at the gift of the shepherd's presence here in verse 4. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Here the shepherd is still at work. And we could say that even though the shepherd is still at work, this is the first dark note that we have sounded in this beautiful psalm. You see, previously David was talking about green pastures and still waters and paths of righteousness, and it all looked pretty good. Didn't we? We had that picture in our mind, and it was beautiful. Yet, when following the Lord as a shepherd, you may still have to walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And David used this very powerful phrase to speak of some kind of dark, fearful experience. You know, it's kind of interesting. We don't know exactly what the phrase means. It's a little imprecise. Walk through the valley of the shadow of death. It's one of these interesting phrases that you can't say exactly what it means, but poetically speaking, it makes perfect sense. It's a dangerous place. It's the valley of the shadow of death. You see, it's a valley. It's not a mountaintop or a broad meadow. A valley suggests it's being hedged in and surrounded. It's not everywhere. It's one locale. And it's the valley of the shadow of death, facing what seemed to David as the ultimate defeat and evil. What could be worse than death? But notice this, please. It is the valley of the shadow of death.
Oh.
It's not facing the substance of death, but the shadow of death. It's casting its dark, fearful outline across David's path, but it's just a shadow. Now, notably, David recognized that under the shepherd's leading, he might walk through the valley of the shadow of death. It wasn't his destination or his dwelling place. It was a place to walk through. And like the preacher in Ecclesiastes, David might say that all of life is lived under the shadow of death. And it is the conscious presence of the Lord as shepherd that makes it bearable. I'm not trying to depress you, but I just want you to think for a moment. Is it not true that all of life is lived under the shadow of death? That when a baby is born, and as healthy and as strong as it may seem, there's something in the heart of every person that holds or looks at that baby and says, I hope they make it. It's a dangerous time, the first few weeks of life.
Man,
we think of our children and we love our children, but we realize that some tragedy could take them away in an instant. When we get older, we recognize the same thing. And when we come to old age, we recognize that all of our lives are fragile. You could say that all of humanity lives under the shadow of death. But it is just a shadow. Now, this is especially suggestive when we read this psalm with an eye towards Jesus, who, of course, is the great shepherd. A shadow is not tangible, but it is cast by something that is. Okay, this book, if it was held in the right light, could cast a shadow. If the light's back here, the book is in the way, the shadow is cast before it. So the shadow itself is not real, so to speak. It has no substance, but it is caused by something that is real. Well, death is real. The shadow it casts
the
over
bought
life
out
doesn't have to be real. Jesus took the full reality of death in our place so that we would not have to fear the shadow of death. And that's why David can say, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. That line from the psalm, as well as the psalm as a whole, but that line in particular has proven itself precious to many dying people of God throughout the ages. They have been comforted, they have been strengthened, they have been warmed by the thought that the Lord would shepherd them through the valley of the shadow of death. I wonder how many precious believers on their deathbed have thought or have said or have had spoken to them, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, and those words have been on their lips as they have passed from this life to the next. Now, when the saint comes near death, they still can calmly walk. I like that. We don't sprint through the valley of the shadow of death. We don't have to jog or run. We can walk calmly. We don't have to run or quicken our pace in alarm or panic. No, near death, the saint does not walk in the valley, but through the valley. Again, if I could read another quote from Spurgeon, you can imagine Spurgeon preached a lot of sermons on this psalm, and they're beautiful sermons. He says in one place, quote, "Death in its substance has been removed, and only the shadow of it remains. Someone has said is that when there is a shadow, there must be a light somewhere, and so there is. Let us then rejoice that there is a light beyond. Nobody is afraid of a shadow, for a shadow cannot stop a man's pathway even for a moment. The shadow of a dog cannot bite. The shadow of a sword cannot kill. The shadow of death cannot destroy us." This is wonderful. This has application not only to the person who is close to death, but it is for every one of us. I want you to know
Automated.
something
Okay.
in the verb tense of this phrase. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. It's not talking about the future tense, although it includes the future tense, but really it's right here, right now. It doesn't have to be reserved for a distant moment. God can give you that assurance now. So, in the midst of it, David can say, I will fear no evil. Despite every dark association with the idea, the valley of the shadow of death, under the care of the Lord who is his shepherd, David could resolutely say this, I will fear no evil. Even in a fearful place, a place where you might say fear was merited. No, David says instead, I will look to the presence of the shepherd. His presence sends away all the fear of evil. You could even say this, that the shepherd's presence did not eliminate the presence of evil, but it eliminated the fear of evil. And why? For you are with me. This emphasizes that it is the presence of the shepherd that eliminates the fear of evil. Don't miss that line in verse 4. For you are with me. As long as the shepherd is with the sheep are going to be okay. No matter what the present environment was, David could look to the fact that God's shepherd-like presence was with him. And he said, you're with me. And if you're with me, I will fear no evil. Now, significantly, it is at the dangerous moment pictured in this psalm in verse 4 that the he of the first three verses changes to you in verse 4. Don't you like that? Okay, all the way up until the third line of verse 4, it's been he. Now it is for you are with me, your rod and your staff. It instantly comes now in the first person. Lord, I'm speaking to you directly. It's no longer he, it's you. And it's your rod and your staff that comfort me.
Is he gonna go
The
out?
rod and the staff were instruments used by a shepherd. The idea was of a very sturdy walking stick, used to gently, as possible, guide the sheep.
All right, I kill. Yellow.
Sheep and to protect them from potential predators. Now, there's some debate among commentators as to if David had in his mind the idea of two separate instruments, the rod and the staff. Does that describe one instrument, or does it describe two instruments? The Hebrew word for a rod, it's something like shebet. Here, it seems to imply just a stick that could have a variety of applications. The Hebrew word for staff seems to speak of a support, something that would be something of a walking stick. They could refer to the same thing, just repeated twice, or it could be that David had in mind two separate things. I can't really say for sure which David had in mind, but that instrument, or the instruments, the rod and the staff, whether they were one thing or two things, those instruments of guidance were a comfort to David. They helped him, even in the valley of the shadow of death, to know that God guided him, even when God guided him through correction, because sometimes the shepherd needs to correct the sheep with the rod or the staff. And it's a great comfort to know that God will correct us when it's needed. Now, we're going to pause just for a moment here at the end of verse 4. Because what many people don't really think about when it comes to Psalm 23 is it presents us with two great images of God. The first great image is, of course, is the Lord as our shepherd. We saw that through the first 4 verses. But in the last 2 verses of Psalm 23, there's a shift. There's a different image introduced. Now, starting at verse 5 and comprising verses 5 and 6, we have the Lord not as a shepherd, but as a host. someone who invites us into the hospitality of his home. Right here, verse 5. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. You see, without departing from the previous picture of the valley of the shadow of death, David now envisions the provision and goodness of God given as a host. It's inviting David to a rich table prepared for him. It's almost like, okay, here we are. As far as we know, we're still in the valley of the shadow of death. And what does God do? He prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies. What a beautiful picture. First of all, a table suggests bounty. I don't want to seem flippant with this, but it's not he prepares a box lunch for me in the presence of men. It's a table. There's so much food, so much provision that there's bounty there. It needs a table. You prepare a table. And by the way, prepare suggests for us foresight and care. This wasn't something hurriedly thrown together. No, it's been prepared. And before me suggests a very personal connection. Here for you, David, here is a table prepared, full of God's bounty for you. And it is prepared, if you notice that line there, the first line of verse 5, in the presence of my enemies. What a striking phrase. You see, the goodness and the care suggested by the prepared table is set right in the midst of the presence of my enemies. So the host has great care and concern for his guest, who is David in this situation, and us. But it doesn't eliminate the presence of my enemies. But it enables the experience of God's goodness and bounty even in their midst. Do you understand this? That it's not like, well, he shows his goodness by chasing all my enemies away. That day will come. But in the meantime, God says, even in the presence of your enemies, I'm going to take care of you. There's
Okay, cool.
going to be a table set in the presence of your enemies. I can't resist reading another quote from Charles Spurgeon here. He says this, quote, when a soldier is in the presence of his enemies, if he eats at all, he snatches a hasty meal, and then he hurries off to the fight. But observe, you prepare a table, just as a servant does when she unfolds the beautiful cloth and displays the ornaments of the feast on an ordinary peaceful occasion. Nothing is hurried. There's no confusion, no disturbance. The enemy is at the door, and yet God prepares a table, and the Christian sits down and eats as if everything were in perfect peace. That's how it is.
I don't get why he did that. That doesn't make any sense to me.
And then when you come to the table, do you see? The host has very good manners. You anoint my head with oil, my cup runs over. There I am, I'm sitting at God's table in the presence of my enemies. And what does God do? He says, hey, let me take care of your head. Now, it was common in those days when a host received his guest or her guest into the home. They would anoint the head with oil. It felt cooling, it felt good, it smelled good. They'd pour a little oil on the head. And then David's cup. Well, David's cup, it's running over. There's David's cup. And he's never thirsty because the cup is full. There's always bounty at the table of God. So you see, despite the dangers about and the presence of enemies, David enjoyed the richness of his host's goodness. He was refreshed by a head anointed with oil, and his cup was overfilled. It brings us to the last line of the psalm, verse 6. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I love that line, don't you? Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. The host's care brought the goodness and mercy of God to David. And he lived in the faithful expectation of it continuing, how long? All the days of his life. Now, when it says goodness and mercy, that word mercy is the great Hebrew word that's sometimes translated loving kindness. In some other translations, it's translated steadfast love or covenant love or loyal love. It's that great Hebrew word chesed. And it's one of the great words of the Psalms and the Old Testament. It talks about God's loyal love, his covenant love, his loving kindness, and God's goodness and mercy will follow us. You can count on it. Matter of fact, I want you to think of this. If goodness and mercy follow you all the days of your life, don't you have a couple of bodyguards following you all the time? You've got an entourage. You've got a posse of people following you. You've got God's goodness and mercy following you, staying close. They are very close to the child of God. And then the final beautiful expression of the host here. Are you ready? I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. You know, you think about that, you think of the guest being invited into a home. That's the idea there in verses 5 and 6. How long can he live in that home? I'll dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The psalm ends with the calm assurance that he will enjoy the presence of the Lord forever, both in his days on this earth and beyond. Derek Kidner says this: in the Old Testament world, to eat and drink at someone's table created a bond of mutual loyalty, and it could be the culminated token of a covenant. So to be God's guest is to be more than an acquaintance invited for a day. It is to live with him. And if I could say, it's to live with him forever. And we've been making our way through the Psalms. We've stopped at the end of each psalm and asked the question, how does this particular psalm point to Jesus? So it's almost funny to bring it up at the end of this, isn't it? How does Psalm 23 point to Jesus? Does anybody have an idea? Of course. Jesus is the great shepherd. In John chapter 10, verse 11, and in John chapter 10, verse 14, Jesus clearly spoke of himself as the good shepherd who gives his life for the sheep and who can say, I know my sheep and I am known by my own. Jesus consciously identified himself as the shepherd of his people. He said, my sheep hear my voice. My sheep know me. I take care of my sheep. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 20 speaks of Jesus as the great shepherd of the sheep. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 25 calls Jesus the shepherd and overseer of your souls. And 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 4 calls Jesus the chief shepherd. Dear child of God, you can go back before this psalm, through it, and just look at all the ways that Jesus is to you your shepherd. Jesus has that shepherdly love, care, concern, and guidance for you. He is the great shepherd. And be very careful about putting your trust in any other shepherd. And you know, I call myself, and not that I take the title unto myself, but that title has been given to me of a pastor. Pastor David Guzik. I don't demand that people call me pastor. It would seem very strange to me for that. But if somebody does want to give me a title, it's normally pastor, because I have been a pastor. That is. But pastor simply, in its original meaning, just means shepherd. Now, I'm grateful for the calling that God has put in my life and the opportunity that he's given me to serve as a shepherd among God's people. I think that what I do with Bible teaching, even if it's teaching right here, through the Psalms, I think that what God has given me to do in Bible teaching, that's a way that I, as a shepherd, I contribute to the feeding of the sheep. I'm feeding them God's word. But I am never the great shepherd. I am never the chief shepherd. I am never the shepherd that could ever, in 1,000...
Yeah, purple sucks. Why would he start a war with me? Oh, really? Oh, but you're gonna keep that there?
Thousand years replaced the place of Jesus in your life. You have a shepherd, and God may have what sometimes we're called as pastors under shepherds, or maybe more appropriately, sheepdogs. I don't know, whatever you want to say. Anything that would distinction. We have a role in caring for the sheep, but it's definitely below the role and the authority and the care and the love of the great shepherd, the chief shepherd, Jesus Christ. Jesus is all over this psalm. Now, one last thought, though. Jesus is not only in this psalm as the great shepherd, we do see that, but also as the great host. Remember that in verses 5 and 6? This psalm presents to us not only the Lord as our shepherd, but the Lord as our host. And I want you to think about this. Jesus is the great host. Did you know that Jesus went to heaven to prepare a place for you? He did. Mm-hmm. If you're his child, if you're born again by God's Spirit, if you're part of his new covenant, if you've repented of your sins and put your faith in Jesus Christ, all of that belongs to you. then Jesus
All
went
of
to
it.
heaven to prepare a place for you, just like a good host would. Now, he cares for us very well until we get there. He doesn't start taking care of us as a host when we get to heaven. He takes good care of us here. He takes good care of us now. But there's an ultimate heaven for us to go into, where we will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Let me pray and thank God for this beautiful psalm. Lord God in heaven, we thank you that you are our shepherd. We thank you that you are our host. And we are so pleased to receive your shepherdly care. We are so pleased to benefit from your
All
hospitality.
right, well, I'm just going to slam that.
We love you, God.
It's like,
We thank you for the warm-hearted care and concern you display to us through wonderful psalms like this. We pray that this psalm would continue to meet the deep needs of soul for us and for others. And we thank you, Jesus, for being our great shepherd, our great host. We love you, Lord, and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, I tell you what, we are honored to have a special friend of the house. My pastor, Pastor Lori and I's pastor, Pastor Tony Cook, is here. He served with Rainbow Bible Training Center and Church.
how they escaped the alt-right. I want to see this. We've been watching a lot of videos about like the alt-right pipeline and shit. Just a bunch of horse shit, but I want to see what this guy's going to say about
You were
this.
the first in your family to go to college, but why stop there?
With a graduate degree from
And surely enough, I found. In the second half of the 2000s, I was an edgy teenager, and as such, I had declared myself an atheist. I went online in search of atheist content, and surely enough, I found it. It was the Atheist Experience on YouTube, a show where Christians can call in and have debates with real atheists. It was fun to listen to, and I felt more validated and smarter after each episode, so naturally I wanted more. And so I came across this guy right here. TJ Kirk, the Amazing Atheist. The OG YouTube skeptic.
Bro, the Amazing Atheist sucks.
At least for me. And the main gist of his content, early on at least, was opposing American fundamentalist Christians, who actually used to be a presence on YouTube back then, believe it or not. And by that I mean people producing content which was solely focused on Christianity. Not long after, I came across Thunderfoot with his series about creationism, and Pat Condell, one of the best atheist orators on YouTube at the time, and then Armored Skeptic at some point, along with a few others I cannot really recall anymore. At that time, anti-religious content was the bread and butter of the YouTube skeptosphere. Up until around the early 2010s, I should say, where all of their contents pretty much at the same time started shifting towards a certain direction. Skepticism against Christianity started fading into the background, and I mean, no wonder, the well wasn't that deep. There was a finite amount of arguments in favor of Christianity, and it wasn't the brightest people making them, so long story short, the YouTube skeptosphere had to look for new content. And guess what? They fucking found it. The new targets became feminism and progressivism, and sometimes Islam. Every single YouTube skeptic I was following started making video after video after video about feminism, progressivism, weird posts on Tumblr. That became the sole focus of their content. And, as an edgy teenager, I fucking loved it. It was a lot of fun to watch them go against these purple hair, screeching, man-hating, fun-ruining feminist types. And then came this little-known event called Gamergate, which saw these content
None of this is the alt-right.
creators just catapulted into space in terms of views. Entire reactionary channels grew out of this just by doing anti-feminist pro-Gamergate content, including our friend Sargon of Akkad, whom I found during that time and so became a fan of his. However, the content these people produced soon started to shift. We went from haha these dumb feminists to our entire existence is now under threat by these feminists. We have swung too far to the left and now we have to immediately course correct back towards the center. They want to end sexual dimorphism. They want to end masculine men and feminine women. They want to turn us all into these pudgy, non-gender specific blobs who will live out their miserable, depressed life because they are forced to act contrary to their own nature in this ultra PC hell that we're constructing. That is flowing out of these SJW-infested universities,
just move
which
that
are now
17.
basically these progressive indoctrination centers. If you
Yeah,
let
this guy's
them
gonna
win,
get
you will
whacked
not see
again by the black. I mean, not by the black, but by the. Yeah, that's 7 right there. Just gonna whack his 7, hopefully. He's got his stack locked in now. Oh. What does he do with that? Weird move. What the fuck is that?
any more hot women or masculine men. They say it's sexist. We know it's normal. What do we do? The left has simply flung too far. I mean, hey, we're classical liberals, we believe in the meritocracy, we believe in colorblindness. I guess our only...
What was I doing down here?
The choice now is conservatism. If you are a classical liberal, a centrist, you have to vote for conservatives to try and drag the liberal left back towards the center from this insanity. This is where I was, along with millions of others. Without me noticing, this anti-feminist, anti-SJW classical liberal content had managed to implant this debilitating fear inside me. I honestly felt attacked, really, under siege. Skeptics told me that feminists think that my masculinity is toxic. What? That's not true. I'm just a normal guy. I'm not toxic. My god, these feminists are insane. What's this? They're now harassing some kind of old Canadian college professor or something? Jesus, that's terrible. As time went on, I sank deeper and deeper into essentially doomerism. And consequently, I was listening to more and more Sargon of Akkad. But something was bugging me about him. Something was wrong. The things he said, the arguments he made, just started ringing increasingly hollow. He sounded more and more like those Christians back in the day, making the exact same arguments over and over again, just perhaps dressed up a bit differently each time. I mean, it felt like...
So is he saying that they were the alt-right? Because they're not the fucking alt-right. If that's what you think the alt-right is, then you're fucking crazy.
Groundhog Day. At that point I still wasn't a leftist. And if you ask me, I would have told you I am a classical liberal. But that bugging feeling was there. The exact same feeling I had back in the day when I first started doubting Christianity. So I took a deep breath, went back on YouTube, and searched for something like Sargon of Akkad debunked or something. I was interested to see if anyone could stand up against Sargon's ideas.
Well, yeah,
the thing about
Sargon's
Sargon
not that
and people
smart.
like him back in the day is that they absolutely dominated YouTube. At least in terms of this whole anti-SJW content and culture war. Smaller left-leaning content creators who opposed these people were absolutely dogpiled. If you made a video against one of them, you could expect tens of thousands of dislikes, thousands of comments, people calling you all sorts of names, sending you death threats. It was fucking terrible. So the environment itself wasn't really in favor of any sort of leftist content. However, despite of this, I did manage to find two excellent content creators through that YouTube search. H-Bomber Guy and Sean. They both had videos debunking Sargon of Akkad, and they were excellent. The two videos I saw, Anti-Feminism vs. Facts and Sargon of Akkad Can't Read, suddenly gave voice to all my misgivings about Sargon. And with that, his entire channel and content just unraveled. And for the first time, I saw him for what he really is. A confused and underinformed British middle-aged man just barking into a microphone about the exact same things for half a decade. Through Sean and H-Bomber Guy, a whole new world of content opened up for me on YouTube, leftist content mostly. And I found that these feminists I've been hearing so much about from these shouty men on YouTube were actually not evil. They didn't want to end sexual dimorphism. They didn't want to turn us into these pudgy, sad, non-gender specific blobs. I've learned about toxic masculinity. Namely, that it doesn't mean that masculinity itself is toxic, but rather that our current understanding of it has some elements that are harmful to men. And that feminists' position on toxic masculinity is actually a pro-male position. Feminists, a previous...
No.
The evil and insidious group of people have become humanized in my eyes. I no longer hated them just because some people online told me that they are the enemy. And with that, I was out of the matrix. My fears evaporated, and I actually became more well-balanced and confident. Looking back at all the content I used to watch, all the alt-right type content, it all looks silly in retrospect. But I now also understand much better how someone can just be stuck in it. The number one factor that keeps people there being fear. Which, coincidentally, happens to be one of the main driving forces behind modern conservatism. No wonder they found each other. As the years went by, some of these shouty men actually broke away from the alt-right, moving towards the center-left. But others, including Sargon of Akkad, have slipped deeper into it. Sargon himself became a white nationalist, and now serves as one of the many...
Sargon is not a white nationalist. So then you just become... You're saying that they... what? Sargon is not a white nationalist. Are you fucking crazy? Because Vosh says that he's a white nationalist? You're doing what you made... What? I don't even like Sargon, but... bruh.
Many entry points for disaffect.
I kind of want to watch that video. Vosh debating Sargon of Akkad. Yeah, you're gonna listen to a guy who fucking watches fucking kiddie porn. That's what you're gonna do.
With us today, heavy hitters, folks. This is going to be.
You're gonna take anything that he has to say seriously. Yeah.
A lot of fun. So if this is your first time here, by the way, consider hitting that subscribe button, as we've got a lot more debates coming up that we are very excited about, including you'll see on the bottom right of your screen this March in person. We're going to have Destiny and Bosch crossing swords. That's going to be a big one, likely in Los Angeles. Going to be a lot of fun, and that will be streamed here at Modern Day Debate with.
Ew, what the fuck is that hair?
Social issues. Introducing socialism and capitalism seem like a good way to get started with that, don't you think?
I'm totally deferring to you guys, so I'm happy with it.
He looks like a fucking kitty toucher.
Sorry, say.
Oh, yeah. Do you mind at all beginning with socialism and capitalism?
No, it's fine.
All right. If you don't mind, I'd like to take the first opening. So, with regards to social, I'm terribly sorry.
I didn't prepare a sort of an intro speech.
Oh no, I didn't either. It's all off the cuff.
That's fine.
Nice and casual. So, with regards to socialism, a lot of images get conjured in people's minds when we discuss socialism. When I think of socialism, I think of simple, elegant market socialism, a simple solution to democratize the workplace in our country. Of course, I'm from America, that's what I usually talk about, but any country, I think, could be a fair beneficiary of this policy. And the reason for that is...
Sorry, it's all breaking up on mine.
Yeah, I think your connection might be a bit... I think your might be connection a little bit robot-y at the moment.
Sorry, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I think it's my connection too. Yeah, I'm just closing down browser windows just in case that.
Gotcha.
I think I might go for the kill on both in one turn. Hopefully, I should have gone for the kill on this turn. Because he's going to get a... Yeah, I definitely go for the kill now, considering that he just locked a 61 stack. Oh, he just locked all of it. Hopefully black keeps them all locked and doesn't have a fucking trade. That would be awesome.
Do you want to take a
He
moment
doesn't
to
have a trade. Oof. Sorry.
One thing that sometimes
I defer to your suggestions, James.
Sometimes what happens is, if we have to, it's okay to turn off the video, and that might kind of help it catch up. And as long as people are all here to hear the ideas, I think, even though we don't get to see your face, getting to hear those ideas.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be fine. I think it's because I have, well, literally thousands of tabs open. Because you know how it is. I'll drag a tab into a fresh window and then open tabs in that. And sorry, look, I heard what I think of as socialism, so if you could pick it up from there.
Of course. So hopefully that works. If not, we can limit bandwidth by cutting video. But whatever the case may be, when I think about socialism, a bunch of things get conjured in people's heads. Vuvuzela, Stalin, Mao Zedong, Ho Chi Minh. What I'm talking about, very simply, is the democratization of the workplace, the publicization or the deprivatization of firms. Essentially, if you work at a place, you have collective ownership of that place. This is essentially a worker co-op. This isn't some, vast theoretical economic implementation.
So, well, let me ask you a question then.
Of course.
Why should anyone agree to that?
Well, it would be in the best interest of the vast majority of the people in this country, because it would lead to a change in the power hierarchy between workers and owners.
Well, I disagree, because as we saw last time, half of the businesses in your country are small businesses.
What does that have to do with anything?
Well, that means that they're just small guys like me, who can employ a few guys as well, a few people as well. And what you're saying is, it's actually, as soon as I employ anyone, they're a part owner of what I'm doing, which means I'm not going to be inclined to employ anyone.
For one, the fact that there are a certain number of small businesses in the country has nothing to do with the statistic of how many workers work for small businesses. It may well be
he gonna
that
hit
50%
me
of
up
the businesses
there?
in this country are small, but 90% of the workers in this country work.
What a dumbass. Is that really what he's gonna do? No, that's not what he's gonna do. Okay, cool. He decided against it.
For larger businesses will of course have more employees. Even so, small businesses
I
are
don't think that's true. I don't think that's true at all.
Sure,
but even if that was true, It doesn't matter.
No,
because
don't do
the
that.
point is, it's not just for someone to be because they are given a job. They voluntarily take a job to take ownership of something they don't have ownership and they're not entitled to.
So your original point was that the prevalence of small businesses was in any way relevant to this. Apparently 60 million Americans work for small businesses, which is approximately 25% of the workforce, 30% of the workforce. Again, though, whether or not...
How big do you think the American workforce is?
Well, we can check.
Yeah. I think we should. 157 million.
Okay, so that would
over a third
be...
of them.
Yeah, so about 35% then work for small businesses. And a small
quite a large
business is defined as... Let me see.
Less than 500, was it?
Less than 500 workers.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know about you, but I think a firm with 500 workers is one in which there is a significant disparity between the number of owners and workers at that given firm.
Every firm has a significant disparity between owners and workers.
I agree, which is why worker co-ops
Then
are
why
in the best
bring it up?
interest.
Then
I
why bring it
agree.
up?
The number of small businesses out there is completely irrelevant to my point.
No, it's the number of workers that each business employs is actually irrelevant to your point.
The only businesses that could conceivably have a case against worker co-ops would be ones with 2 or 3 people working there, and I agree with you. Those businesses, for bureaucratic reasons, probably don't need to be made worker co-ops, but the vast majority of Americans do not work for places that only employ 2 or 3 people. The vast majority of Americans work for large firms where they don't know the owner of the establishment.
That's okay.
Okay.
That's okay.
All right, I'm
that's
glad
not,
we
that's
agree.
not a state of affairs
So-
that needs rectifying by socialism.
Okay, so the initial point you brought up about small businesses was completely irrelevant then to worker co-ops. It was a complete pivot. It had nothing to do with
No,
with
it
the
means you're
central
going to
point.
kill a third, at the very least, you'll kill a third of your businesses. Because
What?
I'm not hiring someone if they are entitled to a part ownership of my business. That's
I
what
don't
I'm
know.
paying.
I don't know what we're talking about killing. I'm
will
not. Do you know
kill
what a worker co-op
a
is?
third of the jobs in the United States.
Wait.
yes.
So a firm with 500 people would be killed if it was made law that businesses be cooperatively owned. You do realize
Yeah,
you
no
wouldn't be
one's
making the hiring decisions if you owned such a firm in a worker co-op, right? That would be democratically decided by the workers. Do you know how worker co-ops work?
Yes, but if I owned a business and a bunch of people are suddenly going to be one day my employees and the next day my co-bosses of the business, I might have different opinions on
Who
these
cares
things.
what your opinions are? Everyone's opinions
Well,
are
as
valid. It's a
yes,
democracy.
I know, but what I'm saying is my opinion will generally reflect the trend among small business owners because they have the same interests.
Right, yes, owners. But most people work. They do not own. And I'm interested in improving the well-being of most people in this country. Most
At
people in this
different
country...
times in their lives, they do different things,
Most people in this country do not own businesses of 500 workers or more.
and they never will under your plan.
Yes, good. Much in the same way that I'm not particularly fond of slave owning as a trade, nor lords and serfs, I think that moving towards an economic system which doesn't have the vast majority of people made subservient to the business interests of an incredibly small minority is a great way to move forward. I'm populist like that. I want to improve the lives of most people.
Voluntarily exchanging your labor for money, in exchange for whatever labor you're being asked to do, justifies stealing the businesses of half
Stealing the business.
people earn.
Do you think taxes are theft? Okay. Then you agree that
But
the
why don't you
government
stand
has the
on top of
right...
it? You are appropriating their property because of your
Yeah,
a
taxes.
priori.
Yeah, you're appropriating their property with taxes. Do you think taxes are theft?
Do you not understand that you're not after taxes, you're asking for shares?
Do you think there is a fundamental
No,
difference?
don't ask my question. Don't ask the question. Answer that question. Do you understand that redistributing the ownership of a business to other people, whether they work there or not, is not just?
So it's not theft to take millions of dollars from an entity or a firm, but it is theft then
When did I say
to
that?
reassign. Wait, because you don't believe taxes are theft. Do you
Why
believe
are you
taxes
even
are theft?
asking questions? Why can't you just answer my
What are
question?
you?
Why
I'm
can't you
asking.
say-
So wait. Yes or no? Do you believe taxes are theft?
I'm the one asking the question.
You can't. You
It
earlier
is-
said no, so I'm going to assume that's
No,
what
I
you
do
mean.
not believe taxation is theft.
Wonderful. I'm so glad we
It's-
agree on that, Carl. I agree.
Okay,
I think that
to the host, look, man, I'm not interested in debating.
Backing out already? I'm just asking you for a
He's
simple
already
comparison.
being disingenuous.
By
This happened
asking
in
you
the
if you
last
believe
debate.
taxes are theft. Carl,
I think know exactly where this goes.
Carl,
Listen,
already?
You're not listening to what I'm
Hold on.
saying. You're not listening and engaging with what I'm saying.
Carl.
It is immoral to take. Right, see you later.
Well, hold on one sec. I think we can try to mend it. Like I can
How
play
about
more
we do
active
this?
role.
How about we do this? If I'm explaining something, can we mute Walsh?
If
I
you
just
guys-
asked if you believe taxes are
if you
theft.
guys
But
are-
Walsh, I started
you guys-
talking and then you started interrupting me. Like
But you
did
don't
in the
believe
last-
taxes are theft.
I'm not wasting
one
my
sec.
time
Wash.
with you, Walsh. I've got a video to edit.
Okay.
I wouldn't mind getting an early night.
Dude, it's okay.
So
if this was too
if
much
you
for
can
you,
be
we can
quiet when I'm
reassign.
talking,
another day.
we can have a
Wash.
conversation. But if not, I'm not having a repeat of last time. Understand?
If we can, I promise. I think we can make it work. And I know that you guys are very passionate. And so if we're willing to take just a moment, and I promise. Oh gosh, am I muted?
No, you sound fine. We can take a second to calm down.
What we'll do is let's just take a moment. I promise, Vosh, we'll come right back to you. But if we just have this question come out from Carl, and then Vosh, I promise, we'll come right back to you, and just kind of I'll be strict about kind of moving in to be sure that no one stops anybody before they're done. In fact, if you guys are willing, we could even try this. Once in a while, we do this. Is if you're willing to, if we wait for each other to say done with that point.
Oh, yeah, sure. No, I love civil debate. I love giving everyone a chance to speak their minds. Carl, please take all the time in the world.
I will. Thankfully, I don't need much time. Basically, just because you work somewhere doesn't give you entitlement to the thing. It's someone else's labour that got the business into the condition that it was when they were ready to be able to hire you. You voluntarily accepted the job. You've got no time here. You're just a grasping, greedy socialist who, frankly, I think is afraid of the fact that some parts of life require hardship. That's just it.
Okay, thanks so much. And then go ahead, Vosh, we'll give you a chance to defend.
So I will ignore the baseless ad hominem there. I don't know why Carl felt fit to include that, but I'm a utilitarian. I like instituting social change that will benefit people and make life better for most people. Sometimes passing laws is a part of that. There have been many points in the glorious tradition of Western political theory that we have, sometimes even violently, instituted massive paradigm shifts in how we operate our government. The transition away from monarchy, for example, was not a peaceful one. I'm not advocating for violence. I'm only saying that far more severe things have been done than a law being passed to make cooperative ownership, mandated in firms of a certain size in this country. Then when I'm advocating,
Man, he just really
to be perfectly
screwed up
specific,
there.
Carl, you're just you voluntarily chose to work here. Oh, such and such. This could be used to defend indentured slavery or indentured servitude. My apologies. This could be used to defend child labor in coal mines. You could use this to defend all sorts of miserable things. I don't see fit to consign the majority of Americans, or whatever country we're talking about, to a miserable, wretched, poverty-laced existence just because the prior laws made it such that it was legal for them to be put in that situation, or they will starve. Because, of course, that's always the bludgeon we're hit with. If you don't work, you live a miserable subsistence existence. I want to make life better. Worker co-ops seem to make life better for most Americans.
Thanks so much, Vosh. We'll kick it back to Carl.
If worker co-ops make life better for most Americans, why aren't they the overwhelming business model? I don't agree that I mean, you can't just say the transition away from monarchy. Europe is still ruled by monarchs. And all of the revolutions of the 20th century were horrific bloodbaths that failed. So I don't think that citing them as, oh, we can do this because they did it. I actually think that's a warning away from doing it. Passing a law to have cooperative ownership of businesses, that will have significant effect from the 48% of businesses in the country that are owned by people who don't actually want to have their property stolen. Indentured servitude, child labor, etc., are not voluntary, they're coercive. I can't believe you didn't know that, that's fine. And there will always be people who are less well off than others because that is the default state of freedom. However, that doesn't have to be the only state. There are ways that people can get their way out of it, and there are even things that we can do to incentivize and help people be able to pull themselves out of poverty. But if there's one thing I've learned in my life, that is, you cannot give people prosperity. So taking from some and hypothetically giving to others is simply going to end up with, honestly, I think it's just going to end up as socialism always does. It's the same old cycle.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, that was actually really impressive. There were so many stupid points that were made there, I actually had to write them down.
I thought I wasn't going to win that one for a little bit. Now there's like no way that I can't win.
Because after the first two, I thought, like, okay, I have the answers to these, and then I had to... Okay, so first of all, so I like Carl's suggestion that there isn't an inherently coercive element to the need to work in our society. You suggest that child labor was coercive. I don't see how. They didn't have to work. They were prompted into working due to the financial need of the family. That's why people work today. The coercion element is equally present in both of those cases, but we agree nonetheless that somebody should, step in and prevent children from being able to work. Because it makes society better. You pointed out, just a quick, am I muted? Carl's cam froze for me. I didn't know if that was the system being muted.
No, I think Carl just closed off his cam just
okay,
to
that's right. Yeah,
let us
save
connect.
that. Secondly, Carl asked, why isn't socialism already done if it's the best system? Well, the most ethical and effective system
there we go.
doesn't magically come in.
Beautiful. I think we'll play one more game and then we'll be done.
Capitalism is better right now than monarchical, mercantile capitalism was, and it's better than the systems that existed before then. But capitalism didn't just magically appear at the beginning of human existence. We had to work for it.
Red just bought it out right at the beginning.
For that. Just because a system is good doesn't mean it already exists. If that was the case, under Sargon's logic, then feminism wouldn't exist, because he believes that feminism detracts from the sort of best state of society. He doesn't feel it's necessary. If he doesn't feel it's necessary, why does it exist? Well, obviously because things are a little more complicated than that. And I'll leave it off on one point, which is Sargon said freedom means inequality. If you have freedom, you will invariably have inequality. And there will always be inequality, of course, of many types. There's no denying that. However, I think it's important to point out that this is an incredibly disingenuous and blasé way to hand-wave the suffering of millions. And billions, maybe? You can't just excuse people suffering.
I want to see where
suffering will always exist. You always have to try to make the world better.
What's this?
That's an excellent question. No, I think that some things can and should. Right. I'm sure you do. Right. So, I would say to anyone listening, take what Vorsha said about me and see if it applies to him. For example, ask yourself, why did he choose the first Google search for a poll that agreed with him? Well, this poll agrees with me. End of conversation. There we go. I've got 2 polls that don't agree with him, but why are they not relevant? So Vorsha's doing exactly the same thing he's accusing me of doing. I'm not saying I don't think there's a conspiracy, so Vorsha's lying. However, he knows that it sounds like it's a smear. It sounds like conspiracy. Oh my god. I'm not saying there's a conspiracy. There's a movement. It's an active cultural movement. They're very open about this. They have websites and advocates and legal representation. This is a movement. It's not a conspiracy.
Oh no, I didn't mean to do that.
The problem that Vorsha doesn't seem to understand, and in thinking that he can apply appeals to the science, the science isn't settled on this issue. Like I keep saying, that's the problem. We are still unsure of what the long-term consequences of all this is because it's also new, and there seem to be some very bad long-term consequences, which I think probably have to account for the 40% suicide rate in the trans community. So I think that being cavalier about this and shouting down people and misrepresenting them and trying to describe them as essentially evil, which is what Vorsha's done, is exactly the kind of problem I'm talking about. It's exactly why I would use the term grooming, because this can be, I mean, I can emotionally resist this because I know how much of a joke Vorsha's opinions on these are, but a young person might not and might be intimidated into it, especially if it's not just one person doing it. Everything and everyone is ideological if the radical left is to be believed on in any way. And to be honest with you, I think on that point, I remember back when I first started, not really understanding that point. It is a long study. I've come to realize that they are correct, that everyone is in some way ideological. To say that they're not means that they just don't recognize how they are ideological. These studies, undoubtedly, I would have to go through. I don't know. I didn't think they're all ideological. However, I think a lot of them are, and ones that are actually quite intimidating to ones that aren't. I don't have the link up because I didn't think I need it, but there was an article on The Guardian yesterday, I believe it was, that was specifically talking about an academic who was getting her work shut down because she was just researching into trans issues, and she was finding answers that the trans community online didn't like, and various points of pressure were being put on the faculty and establishment she worked for. So yeah, I think there is actually a kind of, maybe you could probably argue it's too strong, but I think in effect it amounts to it in at least some of the cases. And because of the seriousness of this as a topic, I don't think any of the cases should amount to grooming. But then I don't think that any of the workers in our country should be exploited through mass immigration. So, yes.
Gotcha. Thanks so much.
Yeah, just if anyone's curious why he talks like that, you would have to too if you didn't have any evidence.
Just so we don't have to. Hold on one sec. Just to go into Q&A before there are any more. Before there's any more conversation.
Yes.
All right, so here we go. Thanks so much, everybody, for your questions. Very excited to read these. Next up, let's see. I'm going to try to read these and try to make sure I understand them as best as possible. Let's see. Steven Steen, thanks for your super chat. It says, we appreciate your donation to Trump 2020, Vosh. He's a joker.
You got me again, you sneaky bugger. I didn't actually donate to Trump 2020. Oh, you'll get my chat next time.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Pasadist John, question to Sargon, do you support the personal ownership of nuclear weapons?
That's an excellent question. No, I think that some things can and should probably be regulated.
Weak.
Next up.
I know, right? No McNukes for me. But thankfully, with nuclear weapons, I think it's highly unlikely that private.
They already have private.
Even if they somehow could, it's probably best.
Private
Gotcha,
nukes.
thanks so much.
I mean, it's heavily regulated, but like private companies are the ones that make nuclear bombs.
Let's see. Mothra J Disco, thanks so much for your question. They asked, Sargon, would you join? I don't know what. I think this is something to do with North Korea. Would you join Juice Gang? Bless the commune.
See, my fans have gotten to that.
Juice Gang left the commune. I'm not familiar with that term, I'm afraid. If it's anything like Nazbol, possibly. When liberalism fails, that's where I'll go.
Gotcha, thanks so much. Adam
We
Friended,
know,
thanks,
Carl.
Thanks for your question, Adam Friended.
Compelling points.
He says, the only people who want to start worker co-ops are people you would never want to work with. I think that's for you, Bosch.
I'd say that's fairly countered by the data that A, worker co-ops have a tendency to be more resilient to market fluctuation and price shocks, meaning that they're very good at weathering unfavorable business conditions, and B, that they have a higher average level of worker satisfaction within those who work there. So it's good. That's a good shot. A little pop there. But once again, the studies disagree. But that's okay. Maybe one day evidence will be against me.
Why is it that people don't just work at worker co-ops if they're great?
Darn. Well, if only we had a chance to go into the institutional barriers to the formation of worker co-ops. Funny thing though, did you know that there were
What's an
small
institutional
attempts at forming private businesses back during the feudalism days that were constantly being squashed by the monarchy? Why then did more serfs not go ahead and participate?
That's totally untrue. You don't know what you're talking about.
I'm sorry. Wait. Are you saying what I just said was incorrect?
Yeah, you don't know what you're talking about. But I'd like to ask you a question about the formation. Yeah, you don't. About the formation of worker co-ops. What's the institutional barriers there? I want to know.
Sure. Okay, so the first one is ideological. That would be people like you, who misrepresent data, who convince people that private ownership is the way forward. There are the ideological arguments against the salience of collective ownership. That's the biggest hurdle. You got to convince people that an idea is right before they'll back it. This has been the case for every political paradigm shift.
So that is the only hurdle, isn't it?
No, there are institutional hurdles as well. Banks are much less likely to loan out to worker co-ops, in spite of the fact that they're actually more likely to survive the first 3 years of business than traditionally managed firms, because there is a broader preconception of
All right,
worker co-ops
I'm
are
taking
effective
North
than
America.
privately owned firms,
Let's
which doesn't
shoot
seem to be
some.
the case through the data. So that's an ideological
hang on a
and
second,
a theoretical barrier.
Hang on.
Why don't you take the time to go through the data before asking me questions? I can't
Because
educate
I'm
you
not an
with
advocate for
questions.
I'm not an advocate for this. You are the one who's here to educate people and work co-ops. It's your
We're in the
position.
Q&A
Why do
segment,
banks have
Carl.
access to this data?
I do want to.
Hit me up in my
That's
live
the
journal.
question.
Tweet at me,
That's the
Carl.
question. No, I don't have a Twitter account. What is the reason that banks don't have this data? Like, why don't they care about the data?
Because
if a worker co-op is more guaranteed to give a return,
because
are they
bank-
literally ideologically predisposed to hate cons?
Because bank lenders don't have all of this data in front of them, and bank owners don't want worker co-ops to be more popular. It's against their ideological interests.
Given that the
Right, so they've
original
all got
question-
hang on. So they've all got a shared ideological.
I'm deferring to James here. I don't know why
get
we're
that.
going off on this. This is Q&A.
Just to try to get through as many questions as we can. I think the original one from Adam was for Bosch, so we'll jump to the next one. Oliver Catwell, thanks so much for your question. Actually, wait, we do have one. Nestleg20, really relevant. So this is for Sargon this time. It says, regarding your argument, quote, if worker co-ops are so great, why isn't it the dominant system? They said, if the UK IP was so great, why isn't it dominant UK party? See the fallacy now. That's what they had said.
No, that's not the same. It's the economic model that we're talking about, right? And it's an economic model that follows market forces. It's not a political party that's looking for votes. And if it is more economically stable, can weather negative outcomes and negative market fluctuations, whatever happens, more reliably than the alternatives, then what would be the argument against it? You know, it's like saying, well, women, what the gender pay gap, women get paid less than men. Well, why
Why
does
would he
anyone have a higher
put in
amount?
there?
You know, why would he?
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Appreciate that. Next up, we have Oliver Catwell. Thanks for your question. They said, I work with the mentally ill. Socialism would help their housing. Capitalism drives better medicines, which they can't afford. How can we fix this?
I mean, I take a good shot at that. There's no denying that private firms have done a ton of work producing pharmaceuticals, but one of the reasons why pharmaceutical costs are so high in this country is because the government and insurance agencies don't negotiate their prices down. There's no reason for the insurance agencies to, because they benefit, because if people can't pay the upfront cost, then they have to be insured, and likewise, the government doesn't because meddling in private capture, what have you. Both solutions, both problems can be solved by unifying the interests of those who are in power with the interests of the population of this country. Working to implement market socialism would go a long way towards aligning the production of our pharmaceutical industries with the needs of our broader population, because they would no longer be able to, collaborate with our elected officials to make it so that we can't negotiate drug prices and what have you. Also, a lot of medical research is done in universities, which is publicly funded, so there's already like a pretty heavy public element to that stuff. Sorry, didn't mean to ramble.
No problem. Thanks so much.
Just to add to that, I do think that there is. I mean, I'm not a huge proponent of private healthcare. Actually.
Why?
I'm not libertarian. I don't think it's unacceptable or anything. But they do make the argument that it will slow down innovation and it will slow down the rate of cures, frankly. And I think there probably is some merit to that. I think it's just
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Next up, appreciate your question from, let's see, Bryce Nance. Thanks for your question. They said Zuck might have consent, but not informed consent. So I think we're talking about Zuckerberg and Facebook.
That's true. Zuck is fucking America over, not even getting proper consent to feels.
This guy sucks.
Well, how are you defining it?
You're a question asker.
What does informed consent look like for someone using Facebook?
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Next up, appreciate it. Let's see. Matra Day Disco got a critic here. They say Migration Watch is a fascist site, Sargon. So, do you want to give a defense?
Migration Watch is not a fascist site. It is not a fascist site. That's ridiculous.
Thanks so much. General Balsack. That's the real name, by the way. Okay, thanks so much. We appreciate your question. They say, Bosch, why do we not see more co-ops being formed in the U.S. if it's a better model?
Just because something is a better model doesn't mean that it is A, a better model for everyone, nor does it B, mean that people in power want to implement it, nor does it C, mean that the best model will automatically be implemented. I think that capitalism is better than feudalism. Took quite a bit for capitalism to come about, even though the material conditions that allow for capitalism were present many hundreds of years ago. It took a little bit for it to get off the ground. The idea that better systems just automatically win is ridiculous. Slavery is bad. I think most of us watching would probably agree with that. You'll find that slavery was in existence for most of human history. I think most people here would agree, maybe now I'm reaching a little bit, that women should be able to vote. That was not the case for a long time.
No.
I don't know how many of you believe businesses should be able to discriminate against black people, but
maybe I'm reaching.
my parents were, just about around back when that was legal. Just because something is good doesn't mean it just happens. You have to fight tirelessly for what you believe is right.
Oigon and SJ.
Oh, she's singing. There you go, down with that 4. I mean, that's a smart
Bosch,
decision
will you
to
stop
do.
the... What? I don't know exactly. I know what Oigon means. What does SJD Bosch mean?
I assume it's like
think
SJW because the 2 V's next to each other, like SJW Vosh, basically.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So, thanks so much. Thanks for letting me know, you guys. They said, will you stop the matriarchal hell state of family courts, and in what way will you replace them?
You want to take this?
Honestly, Vulture, I think you'll probably agree with me on this one. I'm just going to use the example of Britain because I'm familiar with it, but it's basically the same in America, as I'm aware. Essentially, family courts are actually really patriarchal. There's just the automatic assumption that the woman is the better caregiver and the man is not, and men have to work very, very hard in order to be able to see their children, which is not is anti-feminist, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many feminists as well. So it's one of those rare occasions that me and the feminists agree on something. But it's born from the idea that men and women actually should be equal partners in parenting. But the British state particularly is actually really guilty of this. It's really patriarchal because you get some some boomer fucking judge.
He actually is right about this, which is
has this really ingrained patrimonia, sort of patronizing fatherly attitude, assuming the son is the instigator and the woman is the victim on every case, and it's not fair. It's not. You don't have to be any one particular ideology to see that this is not equality.
Yeah, I disagree with his flagrant use of the N-word, but apart from that, I completely agree.
What?
With, no, I completely agree. Yeah, 100%.
I think, almost everyone agrees on that one. It is a holdover. Generally, I think the sort of emotional baggage that we have regarding women and against men is definitely influencing me, and it's unfair.
Yeah, it's pretty fucked up. Yeah, I know. I personally have a friend who was who's a father. He's like a young father, and he went to the park with his kid, and he was accused of like being like one of the moms was like up at him, thought she was like preying on kids or whatever, and he was just there with his kid, you know.
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty fucked up,
Yeah, and it's nice that everyone can at least because I've met so many men whose lives have been destroyed by family courts, destroyed. And this I think that contributes to the male suicide rate. To be honest, if I had to point it to one particular thing that I think was the thing we should address, it's that. I think that'll help reduce male suicide.
You bet. Thanks so much. Noah Watson, thanks for your question. For Vosh, what do those economists for migration tend to think about forcing every company to be a co-op?
The economists who argue in favor of immigration, I don't think the economists that talk about that typically talk about the co-ops. Co-ops are actually a very understudied subject in economics. Economics is one of my weaker subjects. I have some PhDs in my community who I talk to try and like shore up my knowledge on this. Most of our knowledge on worker co-ops comes from sort of just like longitudinal studies of the few that exist at a given place. I've got some in America, I've got some in Argentina, but we don't have like this really big like basis of theory. There might be a few more in non-English languages that just haven't been translated because the Mondragon Corporation, which is a worker co-op, comes from Spain and it's huge. So it's probable that their success has spawned some economic discourse that I can't read. But it's something I want to look more into, definitely.
Gotcha. We do have maybe an old buddy of yours, Sargon. Question from a super chat from Hunter Avalone. He's calling you out, Sargon. If you guys So I mean, let's see. I'm making an exception for this because it's just so juicy. People, and I know Carl, you can take it. He says, Sargon, what is it like being so stupid and slippery? If you want to respond, you can, Carl.
It's nice that he's finally joined the left.
You got it. Thanks so much. We appreciate it. Sophie M. Let's see. Appreciate your question, Sophie. She's coming at you too, Carl. She says, Sargon, the study. They quote you. They say, to quote, that the studies are ideologically motivated is a weak excuse not to engage with the research. Did you know that 99%?
I'm not.
And then they asked, did you know that 99% of the trans people at any age do not regret transitioning? Give you a chance to respond, of course.
I want to see that data, and I would definitely like to see studies being done by people who don't have a vested interest in this subject. It's just a fact. There's a huge amount.
I don't see where anything about him
the
being
should be redistributed.
White nationalist
I'm gonna need that one more time.
Yeah, I'm also. They said for Vosh/Sargon, if we produced Ayn Rand, Bernie Sanders fiction, would free market advertising spread it the farthest? Should be redistributed.
I'm going to take a guess and say.
Yeah, I don't
that
see
the
anything.
question
Where...
is whether a synthesis of these ideologies would be.
I like how that guy was just like exposing him as a white. He became a white supremacist.
But thankfully,
white supremacist. But it's like, was he a white supremacist? What the fuck is this guy doing?
I've managed to avoid that vortex, and now I'd like to help other people do the same. I hope that, as I put out more and more leftist content, people from these alt-right circles will be able to find me, and hopefully I'll be able to change their minds. Just like how my mind was changed back in the day in light of new evidence. Or maybe I'll just get dogpiled or something, who knows. Anyway, for the time being, this far-right resurgence both on YouTube and in real life seems to have slowed down, so that's good. But still, the most important work we have right now, I feel like, is to prevent people from going down the far-right vortex. And that's what I'm going to do. aside from making videos dunking on Elon Musk's stupid fucking ideas. First off, because I really enjoy doing them, and second, because those things pull some serious audiences, like holy shit. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little blurb from me, and if you like my content, then please consider liking and subscribing. And I'll see
Buddy, welcome back. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Pseudo Intellectual Live. Today, we have a very special guest. You know him, I'm sure, as Destiny, as Steven. He is one of the largest streamers right now, so really happy that he's taken the time to come chat with us. Destiny, how you doing?
Hey, what's up? I'm doing great.
Doing good here. Actually, I'm lying. I'm being Canadian and just being friendly. I'm sick, so if my nose gets more red throughout the stream, it's because I have a box of tissues next to me. But do you prefer Steven or Destiny? Are you good with either?
Definitely Steven.
Steven? Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I came up during the era of YouTube where screen names were kind of common, so I used to be roaming millennial, and then I kind of abandoned that, but yeah, I know how it be. So first off, happy Valentine's Day to you and everyone in the chat.
Yeah, happy Valentine's Day to you as well.
Yeah, for anyone who celebrates this, I mean, admittedly very commercialized holiday, but I thought we could kind of talk about some relationship stuff in honor of the holiday. I want to open up with a question I think could be interesting. Do you think it's easier or more difficult to find love today than it was, say, 25 years ago?
I gotta be honest, I just woke up like 15 minutes ago. I had a late night last night. You asked me the hard-hitting questions.
Yeah.
I would say that in some, I'm gonna give you the most way. It's like in some ways it's a lot easier, in some ways it's a lot harder. I think it's easier in that you're connected to more people today than anybody could have ever been connected to in the past, which is amazing, right? If you were like an introverted stable boy in the past, you could hop on a social media app and talk to however many girls you're able to match with. That being said, I think the standards and what people expect in relationships has dramatically grown. So it in one way it's like easier to meet people, but in other ways it's a lot harder. So like something that I talk about for men is that probably like 50, 60, 70 years ago, as long as you could like work a stable job and you weren't a total lunatic, you'd probably get a wife because women need to go and find men, marry them, and have a family. That was kind of like the path for everybody. But now that people have so many more paths available to them in life, it's I guess the value add for a relationship is it's competing with a lot of other things.
No, so you say that like women had to get married and stuff. What do you mean by that?
I mean, before women were as educated and before women had...
Is he gonna go for the double kill? Oh. Can he get it? He doesn't get a set, though. Oh, you just fed that kill, bro.
As much a place in the workforce, you're like, if you're a woman, you're like 30, you're not married with a kid. Like, what are you doing with your life? Because you're not really like, they're just like the pursuit of career and the pursuit of education wasn't as common a thing. So it seems like that was kind of like the expected path for women to go down. And if your expected path is to be like a housewife and a caretaker, well, obviously you have to pair off with a man to do that because he's going to be the one that's working. So I feel like that was like a more standard path, like a more accepted kind of people were kind of pushed in that direction in the past.
So, I mean, in your opinion then, with the push for marriage that we saw in the past, was that mainly driven by women?
Bro. Is Yellow gonna win just because of the stupid play? That stupid play? Because now he could kill. He could kill both of them. Possibly. Oh, he's not. What is he doing? What is he doing? Is he feeding me the kill? That would be awesome. Oof. Oh, I was like, bro, if he doesn't have a trade, I can get the kill of both. Does he get this kill? Yes. Shit. Does he not get it though in time? He might not have the speed. Bro, if he doesn't have the speed, that's gonna be so sick. I don't think he does. I don't think he has the speed. Come on. Easy kill for me. Come on. Don't get it. Don't get it. Don't get it. Don't get it. Ah, he got it. Just in the nick of time.
It's like asking like which wheel of a car is the most important. I mean, it was probably driven by women to some extent, but it was also driven by women because it's also like what men wanted, but it was also driven probably by men because it's what society needed, and then like families push you towards it, and then like that was the social expectation. Like, I don't know if I could ever say there's like one force there that was pushing in a direction. I would say that I guess if you look at it from a, I'm trying not to be too woke before 1 o'clock, but if you're looking at it from like a patriarchal point of view or whatever, like social factors are pushing everybody in certain directions. In some ways it's nice, in some ways it's not nice. I guess in one sense it's nice that people kind of had simpler paths, and therefore you don't have as much decision paralysis or, you know, like choice fatigue, where it's like, fuck, did I make the right choice, or blah, 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 because these things were just kind of expected for you. I think that women probably enjoyed parts of it and didn't like parts of it. I think men probably enjoyed a lot of parts of it, didn't like parts of it. Yeah. You know,
Okay,
if you want to go into deeper on anything, we can, but my answer is going to be very macro level right now. So.
No, that's good. Okay, so then it's not necessarily easier or harder today. Would you, Steven, do you prefer being or 50 years ago or 100 years ago?
Wait.
Oh, the only reason why I didn't kill... Oh, okay, he does have a...
Wait, oh my god, you just froze for a second. I thought you were thinking of the deepest question ever. Hold on.
Oh, no.
Yeah, repeat that last thing. Sorry, the thing
Okay,
froze for a
so
second.
assuming you're Steven, you're looking for love now, are you happy to be in 2024, or would you have preferred to be in the past, 25 years ago, or maybe even 100 years ago?
I mean, I like this era now 100%. But also, if I was born, 50 years ago, maybe I would feel
You
different.
probably wouldn't know different.
Yeah, of course, yeah. But hey,
So
maybe in the 40s I would have been a Nazi, who knows? I mean, I definitely prefer this era now. But yeah, I mean, we're products of our time, so who's to say I would have felt 50 or 100 years ago, yeah.
That's interesting, because I feel like from what I'm hearing from my audience, for men at least, there are a lot of guys.
I let you chill, bro. Does he break? No, he's smart enough to not.
Guys who are saying that they are very black-pilled about what the current dating situation looks like. And from what I understand, it's because, I mean, I think nowadays the power has kind of shifted in terms of relationship dynamics. A lot of people think that women are basically holding the keys, not just to sex, which traditionally they always have, but also to relationships, and that if you can't even get in the door for that first initial date, then as a man, your power to technically control relationship status, it doesn't even exist to begin with for a lot of men.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The balance has swung really dramatically. My kind of like explanation for this...
it's like a perfect game right here. It's like... This is such a funny game. Like, what the fuck is going on?
I'm gonna trigger the fuck out of your audience today. My explanation for all of this is I view there's like a basket of feminine traits and there's a basket of masculine traits. And for a long time, religious people and red pillars and everybody's kind of coped that like, oh, feminine traits are beautiful and masculine traits are good and they complement each other. But I think deep down we all know that's fucking bullshit. All the masculine traits are really fucking cool. Having honor, having integrity, being a provider, being able to stand up for your enemies and for your family, blah, blah. These are like really cool things.
Yeah, they are really cool.
Everybody wants to do. I think we kind of deluded ourselves into thinking like only
maybe women should like be cooler, honestly.
men want that. Like women want to be feminine and elegant and caretakers and breastfeeders, and that's like the best thing ever. Not to say that these things are bad. I'm just saying that like in the box of masculine traits, there's like 80% of these traits are things that everybody wants. Nobody wants to be weak. Nobody wants to have to be taken care of. So I think as time has gone on, as women have gotten access to birth control and have gotten access to education and then careers, I think that what we've seen is women have kind of like always had this feminine side. They've done a really good job at growing their masculine side as well. And men have had their masculine side, and that's it. And there hasn't really been a push for men to encompass like more intellectual feminine traits. And so you've got this era now where women have become these like Voltrons of like all these different powerful forces. And now when you're a woman and it's 2024 and you're looking into the dating field and you're like, okay, well, who should I date? Well, you don't need a guy for sex with your birth control. You're not going to get pregnant every time. And you don't need a guy for money. You can work your own job. So now the value add for a guy has to be really high. Because before it was like, listen, do you want to be a fucking unwed, unpregnant loser at 30? Or do you want to get with me because I've got a paycheck? And now, if you're a guy, a paycheck's not enough, And yeah, I think women with like jobs and birth control are like
I should have broke up there, but I bet that
their wallet, which is the only thing guys have ever really been trained to do. So I think, I think it's hard for guys right now because socially they're just not trained, and nobody wants to train them or learn that because why feminist stuff sucks. When you think of feminist stuff, you think of blue-haired, sissy, progressive crybaby guys. It doesn't seem like a cool thing, Yeah.
Right. No, even feminists themselves are not lining up for the male feminist ally, like cuttlefish person who's no.
No. Feminism does suck. I think this next turn I win. Like, there's nothing really anyone can do. Okay. Ha! He just gives up.
But it's kind of interesting because I feel like there are a lot of red pill guys who, strangely enough, share the same opinion that like historically men were kind of there to be the breadwinners, but now that we no longer need men as women to be the breadwinners, it's kind of like torpedoed relationships. I feel like as a woman, which will be my trump card throughout this stream, that kind of like, yes, obviously there was the financial aspect to it, but I don't think that's enough. I don't think that completely explains why we're seeing like marriage rates decline, because I think there's a lot of women out there who, even if it were, let's say, a billionaire guy, 50 Shades of Grey.
There we go. Done. Red was a master. Bro, Red was a master? Alright. I guess I've done that same thing before. Alright. I'm gonna be done. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.